think this is one of the rarest, if not the rarest Heuer ever seen. And I explain you why. I'm Jean-Jacques von Erlach. I am the grandson of Hubert Heuer. My mother was Ingeborg Heuer, born Heuer, the daughter of Hubert. And I am here in Bowcliffe to tell you the story of my grandfather. He was born in 1901 and passed away in 1978, and he had quite an interesting life. And I want to tell you this story because nobody knows Hubert Heuer up to now.
So, Jonathan, this is very exciting.
I'm absolutely blown away that JJ's come over to see us over at Bowcliffe. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. We've got a bit of Heuer royalty here.
You do, and the story that JJ is going to tell us, not very many people have ever heard this story.
No,
this is a major announcement.
Maybe, but not in the depth that we're finding out now. It's absolutely fascinating, and we're also very fortunate to have some of the rarest Heuer watches you'll ever see.
And these are your personal collection, JJ?
Absolutely, this is my personal collection. I don't have many watches from that time of my grandfather, but because, I mean, the most famous watches are the ones that under Jacques Heuer. But I love these watches, the pre-Jacques Heuer watches, because they are very special and very, very lovely pieces.
Now, how did you two meet?
There's a sort of Heuer community, isn't there, on
Absolutely.
Instagram, and it's inevitable, really, with something like this, with us as Vintage Heuer and JJ being part of the family. It's perfectly logical that we would message each other via Instagram. But
Yeah.
I was just so pleased when JJ said he wanted to tell this story, and he thought that we were the people to help get this story out there, which is brilliant. Because these are museum pieces. In fact, one or two of these pieces I have seen in the museum before.
Absolutely.
Okay, JJ, over to you. Tell us stuff we don't know.
Okay. Now, I start maybe with my grandfather, of course. He was born in 1901. It was a time where Heuer was a very small company. And he spent his youth in Bienne, close to Bern, where the factory was in the beginning of the 20th century. Before it was in Saint-Imier, which is in the canton of Neuchâtel, and that's where all began in 1860. My grandfather was the grandson of the founder of Heuer, and I would like to start with this watch here. This is a very special watch from my grandfather. He got this at the age of 16 when he had his confirmation at church, and it has also, it is written here, Hubert B. Bernard Heuer, 1917.
I mean,
That's provenance, isn't it?
You couldn't get any better than that, Jonathan.
No.
The atmosphere in here is electric, actually, because this is Jonathan's dream territory. So this is a one-owner family watch.
Yes, absolutely.
But look at the condition of it as well.
And the condition is perfect. It's a silver watch.
Let's spin that around for the camera there,
Yes.
JJ. And it's got the yellow decoration with that black on silver.
And also from behind, it's very nice.
Look at that, it's immaculate. I mean, these things were known, Jonathan, weren't they, for getting banged around?
Yes,
These everyday watches.
And you know, and the interesting thing is that based on these watches, Heuer started to make also wristwatches, because during World War, it was not very convenient to have pocket watches in the war. And that's why, as you can see here, it's more or less the same watch.
Yeah.
They put bracelets on. And so, in fact, pocket watches became...
This would be First World War.
First World War, absolutely, yes. That's how people started to wear bracelet watches, like wrist watches. And This was in the beginning of the 21st century. My grandfather joined Heuer in 1921 at the age of 20. He just had he finished his school. He wanted to study, but there was a need in the company that somebody should take care of the American market.
Okay.
And that's how he was immediately sent to New York. There, Heuer had a good business relation with a man named Henry Freund, who was the retailer of Heuer watches. And there was a long collaboration with Henry Freund. I will come to that later on again. And he made an apprenticeship in New York and became the only responsible person for around 40 years for the American market.
So was he primarily involved in sales and marketing?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
He was
very
not
good
a
at
watchmaker.
it.
Yeah.
He was not a watchmaker, but he was a marketing man.
Can you imagine how exciting New York
Yes.
was in the 1920s?
It must
Must
have
have
been
been.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, in the early part of the 1920s, into the middle 20s, the Art Deco period, it
Yeah.
would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
But then, so he was obviously very successful in marketing and selling. But what happened in 1929 with the big crash?
The big crash was also quite terrible for Heuer. Suddenly there were no watches sold anymore, and Heuer had a financial crisis as well that lasted up to the 30s. And in 1934, my grandmother had to save Heuer because they had a cash problem, and she helped Heuer to survive with an amount of about 20,000 Swiss francs, which was quite a lot at the time.
Wow. So had your grandmother not bailed Heuer out in 1934, Jonathan Scatchard here may not well be in business. So you can thank JJ's grandmother
Absolutely, yes.
for your
Amazing
success.
story. Amazing story.
Well, imagine, I mean, the whole story wouldn't have taken place. I mean, all the story of Jacques Heuer and Joe Sifford and Claire Regazzon, Niki Lauda, all the Formula
Yes.
One stuff wouldn't have taken place.
Because of that investment from your
Because
grandmother.
of that investment, yes.
And that was a lot of money in 1934. I don't know what it would equate to, but, a couple of 100,000, I'd guess.
Probably.
It must have been.
Yeah.
Probably. And it had been paid back in 1945.
Oh, right. She got her money back.
She got the money
It's
back.
a good
from me,
news
yes.
story. Now, this photograph here,
Yes.
is this your grandfather?
This is my
have a look at
grandfather,
him.
and he was in a military preschool at the age of between 15, 16 or 17, something like that.
Yes.
And that's why this picture corresponds to this watch here.
Was he wearing that watch?
Of
in that
course,
picture?
he was wearing. On the picture, I don't think so.
No.
But he wore this watch all his life.
Did he?
Yes, and he had it like in the waistcoat.
So even when wristwatches became much
Absolutely.
more fashionable, he was still wearing his
Absolutely.
pocket watch.
Absolutely.
Wow, a man of tradition.
Yeah.
Yes, he was a gentleman. Something very interesting with in Vienne was that Charles Heuer, the brother of Hubert, they visited their employees every Sunday. They went on the horse and they were riding around saying hello to their employees. And this was very much appreciated. And there are people who, there was this one guy, his name is Racine. He was one of the inventors of the Caliber 11. He remembered my grandfather when he was visiting his father, who was also an employee at Heuer. And he said, oh, these men were real gentlemen. And my grandfather, he was a very elegant person, and it was very important to him to represent Heuer in a very stylish way. And I think this is also the reason why I'm here, because it's very stylish environment here as well. So, okay, we were in 1934. Then, of course, the Second World War started in 39, and that's why I brought this watch with me, because at that time, from 1939 to 45, military watches have become very trendy. And this is a sort of a military watch, as you can see. And this is, as far as I know, caliber 23 Valjoux. Most of the companies made the same kind of watches at the time, which is particular, that these watches are called so-called big eyes.
Big eyes, because of the
secondary
dials.
The redials. Exactly.
Oh wow!
And as well as this one here, where is it? Here, this one as well. This is a typical. When I showed this watch to my mother, when I found all these watches, she says, "This is so typical Hubert.
Oh really?
This is his style. This is the watches he loved."
And these were the watches that he was selling.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But you found these in your mother's
Yes.
attic. It's incredible.
Oh, hang on a moment. Hang on a moment. You found these in your mother's attic?
I found about 15 watches in the attic of my parents' home. And at a time where we didn't speak about her, because what happened to her in 1982 was quite a disaster for the family. And
okay, let's just zoom forward very quickly. We
Yes.
can touch on that later. What did happen that caused such a disaster to the family?
Well, the quartz crisis struck Heuer terribly, and this with the consequences that the family had to leave.
You remember we
company.
talked about the quartz crisis before.
We have done.
This was when everything, the mechanical watch was thought to be outdated, and everything went to digital watches,
Yes.
effectively, which ruined the Swiss industry.
Absolutely. There were more or less only 3 companies that survived. It was Patek Philippe, Rolex, and Audemars, more or less. And the others, they all collapsed.
And did Heuer go into receivership? Did it go bankrupt?
It went bankrupt, yes.
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 Okay, so this was a very, it's an open sore for your family for very many
and
years.
it was especially terrible for Jacques Heuer, because he created all these watches in from the 60s to the 80s. And for him, it was as if his life was taken away. And it was quite terrible because, then bad feelings came up, and everybody thought the other one was guilty because of this crash, but it was also circumstances. And but the consequence was that we didn't speak about watches anymore in the family.
Wow.
For a few years.
Fascinating, Jonathan, isn't it?
I mean, I didn't know any of this.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I don't think the Heuer watch fraternity will know this. They've certainly never heard it from the horse's mouth before.
Yes, and to the extent that you wouldn't talk about, as a family, to talk about watches, is it?
Yeah, not even
Mum's
watches.
really hurt.
That's a big disaster, isn't it?
And it was especially terrible for my mother. She never wore watches, and she said, "I don't want to hear anything anymore about Heuer watches."
Wow. Okay, so this
And
really formed part of your growing up.
Absolutely, yes. And so I have to admit that the first watch I bought was a Rolex.
Yeah.
And but I changed it. I made a deal. I gave the Rolex and bought a very nice Carrera from 1964. I mean, we changed, and it was fantastic for me.
So when did you really start digging into the family history? When talking about watches was maybe a little more acceptable in the family?
No, I think I started to be interested again in Heuer watches when I found this box in the attic.
Right.
And I went to Jacques Heuer and asked him, "Well, tell me, what's all these watches?" And he was really puzzled to see these watches, and he said, because he has become, in the meantime, he has become honorary president of Tag Heuer, and he said, "Come, you have to bring them to the museum."
Right.
And this was quite strange. I took pictures of all the watches, and I sent the pictures to Christie's at the time, and I got an answer, like 2 lines: "We're sorry, there is no market for Heuer."
Now, hang on a moment. Has that ever been said before, Jonathan, in your experience?
Yes, that's why I started collecting them, because nobody wanted them. There was no
Nobody.
money at all.
Right.
Carrera, £250 would buy a very good Carrera in the
crazy.
90s, early 90s.
And today?
Well, you've seen them. They're £7,000-8,000 on average.
How remarkable.
Yes, and the thing with the Monacos, well,
this
just
is
like
the
a little side story, we had about 10 Monacos at home.
Yeah.
In the red box. It's wonderful, but it was a disaster. They were not sellable at the time, and so I brought these watches to children's birthdays as presents.
Right.
Yes, and if these people still have the watch,
Yes.
so they are very fortunate.
They're in the money.
Yes.
And are these some of the watches that were found in, or were these all
Yes.
found in the loft?
Absolutely, there were some of them. Yes.
Isn't that amazing?
And well, we were in the 30s, so I may continue.
Yeah.
In 1919, Heuer bought the company Jules Jurgensen. I think this is not known at all. Jules Jurgensen was a Danish company, and Heuer bought it, I think, for around 60,000 Swiss francs. I don't know, it must have represented quite a lot. And in the jewelry of my mother, who passed away last year, I found this little wonderful piece.
Oh, wow. Would you mind?
Yes,
Because
please.
that screams the Art Deco period, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I was very astonished to find a Jules Jurgensen watch and not a Heuer. And then I consulted the internet, and I saw that Jurgensen belonged to Heuer for about, let's say, nearly 20 years. And the company was called Heuer Jurgensen.
Did you know this, Jonathan?
No, only a little bit in one of the books, but it was touched on. I've had a Jurgensen before now, but I never thought that it was anything to do with Heuer.
And
They're
Jurgensen,
totally different style. They're not what you think
No.
Heuer is now. These were very elegant
Yeah.
dress watches.
And this is a superb watch, really, very, very elegant, very chic. And so, in fact, this is also a Heuer, although it's a Jurgensen.
Yeah.
but yeah, not very many people will know that.
No, and think of the work that's gone in to make this tiny movement.
Yes.
Watchmakers don't have to do that anymore now. They get away with it.
No,
It's sort of-
no.
And it still works.
Wow.
Yes, it's fantastic. And I think my grandfather offered this watch for their wedding in 1992 or 93. And yes, and then I was 30s. Well, I already talked about the 40s, Second World War, and the military watches. There were also, like in the 30s and 40s, many one pushers produced. So you have the stopwatch here, start, stop, and reset.
Was the Second World War really good for Heuer then? Was there an increase?
Yeah,
in
well,
business
it was
because of
quite
that?
good because Heuer sold military watches also to, for instance, for the German army.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, nowadays, we shouldn't tell it too loud, but of course, yes, and it was also sold to the US Army. They sold also military watches to the US Army as well.
I read something about a shipment that was going to Japan.
As well.
Big shipment that was paid for by the Japanese from Heuer.
Mhm.
The Royal Navy intercepted this shipment.
Right.
And they needed stopwatches, so they paid Heuer for the watches. Heuer then refunded the Japanese.
My
Incredible.
goodness
Oh,
me,
that's
what
crazy.
a story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Heuer provided watches to the Japanese, the Americans and the Germans.
Yes.
Yeah.
The benefits of being neutral, I suppose.
Yes.
Absolutely. Something I have to mention about this Jules Jurgensen, that my grandfather, he had a private audience at the royal court of Denmark, and he offered a beautiful gold watch to the king of Denmark. And apparently he still had the glove where he handed out the watch.
Oh, lovely.
Wonderful.
Unfortunately, this was kind of little museum like about that looked a bit like that here. This glass vitrine. And in 1982, the employees, they helped themselves taking watches because, yes, it was a crisis and Heuer shut down.
Oh, I see. So hang on. So in 82, when the factory closed down and the
Yes.
employees were told that they were no longer employed,
Exactly, but
they took watches.
Yes, but it continues. It continued all the same until 1985. Heuer still existed.
Right.
A consortium of Piaget, Lemania, and the Swiss Bank Corporation took over Heuer in 1982, and they continued to do the same watches until 1985. And for me, these are not Heuers anymore because Jack was already away.
Okay.
Anyway, but this is another story.
Yeah.
So now if we continue my little collection, as you can see here, this is also like a monopusher, but a small one. This is an earlier watch because in the 30s and 40s at the beginning, men wore very small watches.
Yes.
I mean, you might have seen the series Peaky Blinders.
Yeah.
There you can see watches of the time at that time, and they are all very small.
And
There was still a crossover then with pocket watches, wasn't there? You had a
Absolutely,
pocket watch
yes,
with great
yeah.
big
Absolutely,
chains and medals
absolutely,
hanging
yes.
off it. So
yeah,
But the first man's wristwatches are very small.
and that has luminous hands, which of course was quite a new invention in the 1920s and 1930s.
Absolutely.
And terribly poisonous if you breathe in any of the flaky paint, even these days, they reckon.
yeah, well, there's a film that's sort of highlights this where the girls used to lick the paintbrushes to get them fine, and then they were getting cancer.
That's right, and they used to
Yeah.
paint their nails and paint their teeth and go out on the town, and their teeth and nails would be luminous. They were called, what were they called? Radium girls.
Yes, there's a film.
Radium
Yes,
girls, yeah.
fantastic story. They didn't know at the time, did they? They didn't know.
And here I got something very rare. This is a box at Heuer and Company.
The typeface.
Yen.
Yes, so dating to where?
This must be, I think, in the 40s. And here we have
Oh my God.
some stopwatch dials.
Wow, Jonathan, how are you feeling looking at those?
Well, just it's new old stock. It's museum again.
It is fantastic.
Never used,
Never used.
never in production.
Never in production.
And where did you find these? Were these family
I
pieces?
got this box offered by an ex-employee of Heuer.
Okay.
He also offered me original drawings of the Carrera.
Oh, really?
Yes, absolutely, and this is something which is really incredible.
Yeah.
Goodness me. I mean, will they ever be used, or are they? Is there value and interest the fact that they are in that box and that they've never been used?
Yeah, I'd leave them in the box.
Yeah, you would.
Oh,
wouldn't
of
you?
course, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a museum piece
Yeah.
for me, and it is beautiful like that.
Yes, it is.
It doesn't. They don't need a watch around.
No, they don't. Isn't it remarkable how they've changed?
Yeah.
Their desirability has changed. In the day, people would have wanted them for a new, fresh face. Now, it's probably the last thing you'd ever do, put
Yes,
them
these
in a
would
watch.
have been on the watchmaker's bench, and you
Yeah.
could take one out and
That's
put it
right.
into a watch as it was needed.
Wow, how incredible. So how long have you then avidly been collecting Heuers then, JJ?
I think I collect Heuer since 2014.
Okay.
So I'm a very late collector, in fact.
Yes, yes.
Because of all the story, and so
Yeah.
that's why my focus was not on Heuers at all. Until I found the box, and then you know, as Sotheby Christie said, well, there is no market for Heuer. I gave them to watchmakers to renovate them, because in the meantime I had children. I have 2 children, and I thought, yeah, maybe they would like it one day, but I didn't think I didn't think much at the time. And now I think this is the best thing I could do. That's my opinion now. And well, to continue the story, maybe I have to tell you the story about Abercrombie and Fitch.
Oh.
Abercrombie and Fitch, which has become a very fashionable fashion company in the meantime, was a luxury shop or luxury company for jewelries and watches. And Heuer produced watches for Abercrombie and Fitch with the label Abercrombie and Fitch. And this example here, this is one of the first autavias. And you can see here Abercrombie and Fitch. This is, in fact, thanks to my grandfather, who was in charge to develop the American market. And he got in touch with Abercrombie and Fitch, and he was able to do a good deal with the company. And you might all know the Solunar and the Seafarer and the Mareograph, wristwatches, pre-Carreras mainly, and the Mareograph was a total disaster. I think there were about 100 pieces made and they were unsellable. That's why they changed the name from Mareograph to Seafarer. And people liked it, but nobody could read it because you can measure the tides. And although nobody understood how it works, the watches looked very lovely. Yes. And there's still watches like these on the market, and you pay very high prices for them.
So the Abercrombie and Fitch, what period in time would this be?
Well, the collaboration started already in the 20s. Oh. And the last Abercrombie and Fitch was produced in 1971, the Seafarer, and on a autavia. And in the 60s, there were many autavias with Abercrombie and Fitch logo made. And this was afterwards under Jack Heuer. But my grandfather, he opened the door for Abercrombie and Fitch, and the first watches were made thanks to my grandfather.
That's a long association.
Yes, absolutely.
Must have been obviously successful for both companies.
Absolutely.
And when did your grandfather retire from the business?
He retired in actually he sold the majority of the shares to Jack Heuer in 1961. And his retirement and the takeover of Leonidas, which was the main competitor of Heuer as far as stopwatches are concerned, he got this beautiful piece. I think this is one of the rarest, if not the rarest, Heuer ever seen. And I explain you why. As you can see, if you can compare it with this triple date, the subdials are bigger here than in this one. Mm-hmm. And this was typical for Heuers. So, but there are small ones, small subdials. And I wondered because, I showed this watch on Facebook and Instagram. And I got a terrible shitstorm because people said this is a so-called Franken watch. A watch which was fixed with from different brands. But the thing is, in fact, the dial is from Leonidas. And Leonidas was taken over in 1964. So, in fact, the hands and the case and the movement are from Heuer, but the dial is Leonidas. And it was taken over in 1964. So, in fact, this is also a Heuer Leonidas. Although in the movement, you can only see at Heuer. And the particular thing is that my grandfather got this, I think, for the merger or for his official retirement. And that's why this piece is unique, because I'd never seen any watch like this.
And you can trace that watch's provenance directly back to your grandfather.
To my grandfather, yes, absolutely.
It doesn't get any better,
No,
Jonathan.
no, it doesn't.
It doesn't get any better. I mean, that watch will never come on the market, but
No,
I can hear people thinking all around the world now, that's amazing, what's it worth?
Yeah.
They are thinking that.
I remember seeing that in the museum.
Do you?
Yes.
Oh, I see. So this is one that you donated to the museum for on
Yes,
loan for a
exactly.
period.
And everybody told me that this is the most beautiful Heuer I've ever seen.
And yet when you posted it on social media, all the Heuer experts said it was wrong.
Yes. We
It's
get that.
fascinating.
Yes.
You get
Yes,
that all the time.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
things like that.
And it was very frustrating for me because I had to defend myself.
Yes.
There was also very aggressive posts like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, don't, this is not a Heuer, etc. But it is, because it came directly from my grandfather.
Exactly.
And he didn't wear any Franken watches.
No. And out of interest, JJ, what might it be worth?
I have no clue. It's 18 karat gold. There's no price for it.
No.
I can't
It's the
tell.
provenance. The provenance. could
I
be
know.
anything. It's-
I know. It's the
I-
kind of thing that could just, sell for any amount of money. Where would you start, Jonathan, if you were to? What figure comes to mind?
I mean, an old
Maybe
Leonidas.
start at 25,000. I don't
Yeah.
know. But
Okay.
But you
fair
find an old Leonidas like this for 3,000 maybe.
oh yes, with Leonidas, yeah.
enough. Yeah.
But this special one,
But with
yeah,
that
I would
history.
also say 20,000. of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So this is mainly the story of my grandfather. When Jack took over, as I said, we didn't speak. Then, I mean, we still had a good relation in the family, and Jack did a fantastic work.
So let me just backtrack a little bit.
Yes.
So your grandfather sold his shares to Jack in the early 1960s.
Yes.
Okay. So your side of the family then moved away from the watch business. You
Not quite. We still had some shares, and my father took the seat on the board.
Okay.
Board of directors.
Yes, yes.
So as you were growing up, were you fully expecting to go into the watch business?
Well, I had the hope actually, because I loved the watches. I loved the Heuers, and I was especially like the Carreras, and I had a few. And up to 1982, and then, then it wasn't an issue anymore.
No. So the opportunity came to an end for you.
Yes.
So what year did you enter the work market? Was it post 82?
Yes.
So you didn't ever get an opportunity?
Never. Well, so I studied international relations at university, and I made my way in a way or another.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Jonathan, it is a fascinating story.
It really is.
It would be well to be written down, in fact, wouldn't it? I mean, it would make a great novel. They say there's a book in everyone. There's certainly a book in JJ.
Yes.
With that family
So
story.
Your grandfather did do it.
Yes, absolutely. He wrote the story year by year. I have it here, by the way.
Oh,
Sorry. Here.
is this unpublished or published?
Unpublished, yes. La Saga de Tag Heuer. The first 100 years. And it's more or less 1 year per page.
Oh my
That
goodness
was
me.
wonderful.
Okay,
And there you
let's-
can
I
read
just-
everything about the yearly turnover, what happened when which watch was introduced, the collaboration with the company Freund, and also in the 20s, Paul Valette. This was a company that belonged to Heuer as well for a few years. And this was specially designed for the American market, Paul Valette. And these were kind of watches like Art Deco watches that were produced, and there are still some on the market.
It seems to me that there could be a bit of a collaboration here, Jonathan, with you and Vintage Heuer to publish this into, a fascinating. I mean, this is a great video
Yes.
which will be viewed forever. JJ telling his story, but it's something that you could probably publish between you and sell into the market.
it's an interesting tale with even with what happened at the end. I've never really heard anything quite like that. I think, you know, the tragedy of the way that it
Yes.
collapsed, but that was the same for a lot of brands.
Yes.
Some were bailed out by the Swatch Group now.
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
Longines were all taken into in-house, and the ending of this was a little bit more distressing, I think.
And especially for the family.
Yeah.
Yes, it wasn't a funny time actually.
No.
No,
So
not
here
at
you
all.
wouldn't talk about watches for many years. That means that hurts.
Yes.
But as you can see, I mean, in all the different areas, wonderful watches have been produced. From the earliest from 1917 up to 1960, and then in the Jacques era from 1960 to 82. I mean, the variety of watches is incredible.
And the market is growing day by day for particularly the Heuer brand, the Vintage Heuer, isn't it, Jonathan? It's a mainstay of your business.
I think the wonderful thing about Heuer as well is that there's so many chronographs. Brands maybe do one chronograph and lots of dress watches because that's what's sold, but Heuer concentrated on the timing. So
Absolutely, and Heuer was a sportsman watch, and they produced millions of stopwatches. Compared to the wristwatches, they didn't produce many. Nowadays, Tag Heuer produces more wristwatches a year than Heuer produced in 120 years.
That shows the rarity.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
and that's why they're not only nice watches, but they're also a good investment, I think.